Hello everybody and welcome to the shop. While I was down in Shelbyville a few weeks ago visiting Tim Babb's shop, the Woodworking Maniac, John Pierce came to visit. And John, he's the gentleman that made the RJBWoodTurner blank for me. He gave me a number of other blanks. Now he did not make this blank, and I don't remember where he said he got it, but it is a hybrid blank. It is really gorgeous. I'm going to mate this up with a gunmetal and chrome Gatsby kit. I think it's going to be beautiful. John told me that the wood is extremely hard, so it sometimes can be a little difficult turning, but we're going to find out today just how difficult that can be. Stick around. I think this is going to be a really fun pen to turn, and I think it's going to look stunning when it's done. Just look at the colors. It's almost like a turquoise. Let's see what we can do with this blank. Today I'll be using a chrome and gunmetal Gatsby kit. It's really a nice looking kit. I get them from Penn State. There's your part number right there if you're interested in this particular kit. One nice thing about these Gatsbys is the tubes come pre-scuffed, so you don't have to worry about scuffing them up on the sandpaper. They're ready to go right out of the bag. I'm going to take a look at this blank, and I'm going to try to pick. It's really hard to pick a good spot. Both ends look nice. I think we'll go ahead and go with this end right here. I'm just going to put a line on the tube, and now we're going to head over to the bandsaw and get this separated from the blank. I want to check down inside the blank. I got a little bit of a grab there, but I don't see any issue at all inside the blank, so we're just going to tighten up the vise just a tiny bit and go back after it. Nice entry hole, nice exit hole, and as I look down through the blank, I don't see any voids or any tear out. I think the catch was simply the difference between the wood and the resin, and it just kind of gave the feel of the bit kind of grabbing. So doesn't look like there's any problem. We're going to get a tube glued into this and we'll be ready to turn shortly. I'm ready to start turning this hybrid blank, and I've turned a number of hybrid blanks, but I don't know what to expect with this one. I've been told that it's very, very hard to turn, so I'm just going to get into it nice and slow, take my time, and see if I can't come up with a really beautiful looking blank here. This blank had a little toughness to it when I turned it. I'm glad John told me that up front because I took my time, I approached it differently. It turned all right. The biggest problem with hybrid blanks is when you go from one material to another, you got to watch out. You might be able to see I'm dug in. Look at the back of the blank. Follow it. I got a little bit of a divot there where I came off of this right here and I hit this area here and it transferred into the wood where I was pressing harder for the resin and the wood didn't take as much pressure. That should sand right out. I'm not overly concerned about that. I'm just feeling down here. I think I've got a little bit of a lip right here on the end. I'm going to try to clean that up. This end over here feels great, so I'm just going to try to touch this up, and then we're going to come back and start sanding. Feel like I've got a much nicer fit on this end of the blank now. I'm happy with that. And because I was taking a little bit of material away here, I rode all the way back, and now I don't know how well you can see it, but I've gotten rid of a bit of that bump there, which is good. That'll just make sanding even that much easier. I'm gonna go ahead now and I'm gonna sand this. We'll use sandpaper first. We'll sand through the grits. Then I'll come back and I'll use my micro mesh, and I'll micro mesh to get all the scratches out of the resin, and then we'll take a look at it for finishing. I've sanded the blank down to 400 grit, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. What I want to do now is go ahead and run through my micro mesh pads. That'll take any scratches out of the resin and really buff it up, make it look nice. And then we'll take a look at the blank for getting some CA finish on it. That really did a nice job. Really shined up the resin. It did put some moisture in the wood, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this just spin for a while and dry. I don't think it sucked up a ton of water, but since it did bring in some water, I want to give it time to let that evaporate. I've given this blank a very decent amount of time to dry. It does not feel damp at all. I didn't put a lot of water on it, it just was the dampness in the pads. But I did notice the resin, the darker green and black resin, the slurry from it stained the wood and darkened the wood. I'm hoping my denatured alcohol will take a little bit of that out. It doesn't look terrible, but I kind of like the light wood contrast against the, the darker green and black resin. So I'm hoping, let's try a little denatured alcohol and see if that takes some of it out. Doesn't look like it's going to. That's a shame. I'm not sure how to avoid that other than possibly dry sanding with the micro mesh pads. And the other half of this blank I still have. I'll be turning that in the future. I may go ahead and attempt, dry sanding as opposed to wet sanding, because I think the moisture just let the slurry just absorb right into the grain of the wood. I'm gonna let this set for a little bit and dry from the denatured alcohol, let all that evaporate, and then we'll come back and put a finish on it. Normally I wouldn't put CA glue over resin, but with a hybrid blank, in order to protect the wood, you really don't have a lot of choice. You can't really pick and choose where you want the CA to go. It did lighten up a little bit with the denatured alcohol. Not as much as I would have liked. I'm a little disappointed about that. That was my fault. We'll see what the next blank looks like. I'm going to go ahead and shut the camera off and finish out my CA glue regiment. We'll come back and look at it right before we micro mesh. I'm ready to start micro meshing. This is my worn out set of pads, and basically I'm just doing a light once over just to sort of level out and polish up the CA glue. These micro mesh pads are actually designed for acrylics, but if you think about it, when you put a CA finish on a blank, you're really just putting a resin finish over that blank. It's a plastic coating, so I don't see why you wouldn't want to use these to buff it up, because it just sort of makes sense. They do a nice job leveling it. Sometimes when you apply the CA, it'll kind of have a little rough outer finish because of the paper towel, I guess, and this levels that right up. And the final pad, the gray pad, if you just work it for a little bit, really puts a nice shine on it. And that is a beautiful finish. Let me get the buffing wheel on the lathe and we'll buff it up. I just finished buffing this blank and I reached up to turn the camera off and I realized I never turned it on. Not a big deal. You've all seen me buff in the last few videos. There's nothing, I didn't change anything about it. It's the same process, a little blue rosin and buff on one wheel for a few minutes, then buff on the other. And it really makes for a nice blank. Let's get this over to the assembly table and get it put together. We're going to start out by pressing the threaded section into the front of our blank. This is what the nib screws into. Get everything lined up. Okay. Got a really nice fit there. It's just a beautiful, beautiful resin pattern. Let's go ahead now and we're going to find a good spot to press. I think what I want to do is I think I'm going to press the clip into the back of the blank right here because I really want all this resin to show. It's just kind of a neat transition from the resin to the wood. So we're going to press it in right there. And you can see I've got a really nice transition up there between the blank and my pin part. That's all we'll need to press for. The rest of this can be done by hand. We'll grab our spring and we'll find the smaller end, thread that onto the ink refill, which, well, before we do anything else, let's go ahead and thread the nib onto the front of the pin. Got a little bit ahead of myself there. Not a big deal. Now we'll place the ink refill into the pin. Take the transmission, it threads into the back of the pin. We'll test the action. Very nice. And the cap just pressure fits onto the back of the transmission. And now we've got a gorgeous pin. Look at that. That's beautiful. I'd like to thank you for joining me in the shop today. I had a great time turning this pin, and the best part about it was I didn't know what to expect. Anytime you have a hybrid blank or a segmented blank where you've got two different materials side by side, it's always interesting because, you know, the resin may be harder than the wood, so you're pressing a little harder when you cut the resin. You get to the wood, and if you don't back off the pressure at the right time, you divot out the wood. You'll make a nice little dip in it. So it's a real challenging turn, but it's an exciting turn. And I just had a great time with it, and I think overall the pin turned out phenomenal. This is a gunmetal and chrome Gatsby, and I think it's just a beautiful pin. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon. Have a great evening, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.